Were excellent archers. They were looked on as being uncivilized by both Christian and Muslim. Nevertheless, they took over the Muslim world and would have wiped Islam off the face of the earth, except for one thing: they converted to Islam. They found Islam somehow to their liking. They overthrew the Abbasids, spread westward, threatened to overthrow Egypt. They defeated the Byzantines and took almost all of Turkey. What is today Turkey? From the Byzantines. That's where we get the name Turkey from the Seljuk Turks. They did not completely destroy the Byzantine Empire. That wasn't done until 1453. Well, while they were taking over most of Asia Minor, what is today Turkey, the emperor of the Byzantines wrote a letter to the Pope and asked the Pope to help him fight the Turks. This was the beginning of the Crusades. Now we're going to talk about the Crusades now and talk about them again when we come to chapters 12 and 13. The Crusades lasted some 200 years. Beginning in 1095 and ending in 1290, there were about 200 crusades, but of those only 9 were major crusades. Counting all the other little ones, that amounts to about 200 different attempts. Militarily, the crusades were a failure. Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek, the first crusade caught the Muslim world by surprise, and they actually took territory from the Muslims and set up a kingdom in Jerusalem. And to this day, the King of Spain is still called King of Jerusalem. And I've heard there's another man who has the title King of Jerusalem. But anyway, the Crusades came in. Second Crusade was a flop. The Third Crusade might have succeeded if they'd have stayed together, but Philip, the King of France, went home and the King of Germany drowned. And that left King Richard of England to be the only one to fight. And he was not quite a match for the Muslims. And so on and so forth. And each crusade had less and less success than the one before it. And eventually, the crusading spirit died in Europe, largely as a result, I think, as a result of the Black Death. The last crusade occurred in 1290 and 1307. The Black Death hit Europe, carried away a third of Europe's population. Now I'm going to jump ahead of the story a little bit. What actually happened was eventually there came a technological revolution, and the technological revolution only went one way, only hit Europeans, and it enabled the Europeans to later go in and conquer almost every Muslim country. France conquered Algeria, Italy conquered Libya, Britain and France together conquered much of the Middle East, Syria and Egypt and Iran and Iraq. All this was to come later. Then all these countries wound up giving it back after World War II. But again, in the short run, the Crusades were a victory for the Muslims. In the long run, the Muslims were destined to fall behind owing to the technological revolution that only seemed to only hit one side and not the other. Now, something else though that the Turks did, while I'm on the subject, they temporarily stopped the fighting between Sunni and Shiite. They said, we're in charge now, we don't care who you put in charge, we're in charge. But they also set up such a rigid interpretation of the Quran that it stopped all scientific and technological advance. Now, I want to say, Muhammad himself favored scientific learning. This you can find in his writings. Muhammad could neither read nor write. But in the writings the people wrote about him, he believed that Allah wanted his people to learn. But then came the Turks, and they did a lot to squelch learning. And this ultimately led to the Muslim world falling behind the Western world in technology. eventually, in 1453, another group of Turks, the Ottomans, the Seljuk Turks came first. Their relatives, the Ottoman Turks, eventually captured Constantinople in 1453, and that ended the Middle Ages. All right. That's in brief sums up the political history. To sum it up in about 2 sentences, Islam started out spreading out greatly over the Western world, and then their spread was halted, largely due to infighting among themselves. And due to the fact that technology took off in a different direction. Now, I must mention too, in the 1100s, a leader named Genghis Khan built up an empire among the Mongolians, and he spread out also. He went to the Muslim world and began a bloodbath. Everywhere he went, he slaughtered people, just for the sheer fun of slaughtering. But his follower, he did not convert himself, but his followers eventually converted to Islam. The empire that he conquered disintegrated after a time. And with that, the Muslim empire, such as it was, had come to an end. All right. Now, moving on. Okay, that's the political history. Now, what do Muslims believe? And folk, again, I want to remind you, if you think something different, you're welcome to raise your hand. I'll recognize you. But by way of reminder, let's be civil. But I'm going to teach it as best as I understand it. Well, the Muslims believe, first of all, that there's only one God, it's Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. That's the starting point. They do not believe in games of chance. So, now folk, that's not to say, I say Muslims don't believe in games of chance. That's not to say that no Islamic person has never rolled a dice. I mean, there's no religious group that can say every one of our members follows all of our teachings. I mean, that's just unreal. I mean, in my church, I know people who don't follow the teachings of the pastor. I mean, that's something else. But anyway, they don't believe in games of chance, so they don't roll dice, they don't play cards, because those are considered games of chance. They don't drink alcohol. Now, again, I say Muslims don't drink alcohol. That's a generalized statement, I know that. But that's not to say no Muslim person has ever tasted this stuff. A lot of them have, particularly their rulers, and it turned a lot of their people against them. Some Muslim rulers have been totally under the influence of alcohol, a few. Now, I want to say this, folk. No one is any harder against drinking alcohol than I am. But the difference between me and them is I believe this is a decision that should be made by individuals and not made by the state. See if you know. Each of you can decide for yourself whether you're going to drink alcohol or not. Personally, I leave this stuff alone. Now, I don't know how much this shows up, but I've long believed that I'm what you call a dry alcoholic. Now, if I ever take a drink, I'll become addicted to it. The reason I believe that is my grandfather, Cunningham, never drank. Now, if you've heard differently, fine. But it's passed down from father to child. My grandfather, Cunningham, never drank, but his brother, Uncle Sam, did, and Uncle Sam developed a problem with it. My dad had no brothers. My dad never drank, but if anybody was a dry alcoholic, my father was. But he never touched the stuff, you understand. Then among my family, one of my brothers took up drinking and quickly developed a problem with it. One of my nieces took up drinking and developed a real problem with it, super problem with it, that she has not gotten over yet. And I've long believed, but I'm not about to try to find out.
I would definitely believe that.
What's that?
That it passes down.
From father to son, well, father to son or father to daughter. I say if you had, this has been told. It's a gene, and you don't know if you have it until you take a drink. And by that time, it's
Yep.
too late, you're hooked. Now, yes,
Aren't you like a Christian though? Don't you do what's that thing you do like once a month?
depending on church group. In our communion, we use grape juice, not wine. Now, again, that depends on which church you go to, and a lot of persons have become alcoholics drinking wine from the communion service because they feel like they have to drink it all, so they finish drinking what's left. This is documented, folks. Okay, go ahead and laugh if you want to. But again, the difference between me and Am now, Islam also teaches that you should not smoke tobacco. But that's, I mean, a few of them do. And again, no Islamic person is any harder against smoking tobacco than I am. But I believe that is a decision that should be made by individuals. And that's the difference between me and them. They tend to pray facing toward Mecca 5 times a day. And you can tell when it's time to pray, they used to, some of them carry 2 threads, one of a different color. And when there's enough daylight where you can tell which thread is which color, it's time to pray. Before that time, you don't need to, but when you tell, again, this is what I've read, that some of them pray at that time. But they pray facing Mecca. Their mosque is always facing Mecca. Now, the men and women pray separately. Okay. Now, folk, how many of you have ever heard that our public schools have prayer rooms? Some of them. Not all, but some of them have. Okay, one of you has heard that. You are 2 of you?
Isn't that illegal?
It's very true, and you can look up Muslim prayer rooms in public schools. I have researched it. Now, my wife bumped into one of my pupils one day when she was shopping. This was a pupil who went to one of the colleges I taught over in Powder Springs. And when my wife told him that her name was Cunningham, found out that she was my wife, he said, oh, anyway, this student made an A in my class. He said, we didn't know if we believed him. He said that there were prayer rooms in public schools, but we looked it up and it's there. They are Muslim. And now where are they found? In places like New York, Michigan, and California. And the ACLU does not utter a word of protest. They're not. To put it, go ahead.
Okay, so the prayer room,
Yes.
that basically, I'm not sure about New York and stuff.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not sure about them.
Okay.
But in here, I graduated from Chambly, and in here we had our own room, but it was the teacher's room that we
Okay.
would use as a prayer room. We didn't have like one separate room.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I mean, I knew a Muslim teacher who would pray here in a certain room every at a certain given time, and the reason I knew it was I had to wait for my class to begin, and he would come into the room and do his praying in that room. But I'm talking about real prayer. And here's the catch-22. It costs taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars. They have to set up 2 of them, one for the boys and one for the girls. And it has to be Muslim because it has to be facing toward Mecca, and have to have the rugs down, and have to have a laboratory, a place where they can wash their feet before they go in and step on a carpet. It has to have the plumbing, the wiring, the carpet, all this done at taxpayer expense. In the meantime, if a Christian church tried to put a chapel on a public school campus at church expense, the ACLU would order it torn down.
We did, in Chambly, we did have CIA, Christians in Action,
Okay.
so they had their own room, but as me being a Muslim, we didn't have it. So I think it's basically, it depends on the school if they want to do it or not, rather than just state trying to be okay.
The rules, the laws on that change from day to day, and really, I don't know all of them, but I do know about these rooms in the Muslim prayer rooms in public schools, and how that's, yes.
The prayer rooms sound more like religious accommodation rather than
They
anything
do
else.
sound more religious
And it's like,
Well, I mean, I've had more than one people justify it. It's okay, but what about religious accommodation for Christians?
I mean,
what do they need to do? They go to church on Sunday. There is no school on Sunday.
There
They
is
don't
no
have
school on
to
Sunday.
pray in the middle of the day. Like,
yeah, that,
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not very
okay, I know,
religious about that,
you don't see the inconsistency of it. To me, Newt Gingrich says it's highly inconsistent. All right, anybody else? It's highly inconsistent.
Well, when I landed in Tambo Airport in Johannesburg, South Africa, as I was going to get my bags, there was a prayer room in the airport.
Well, was it put there though, an airport expense for taxpayers?
I don't know, what
Yeah.
was it, I'm just making mention of the fact
Yeah,
that
it's-
here in an airport, in the United States, I've never seen one, but in South Africa, there was a prayer room.
Well, I'll tell you something, what I've heard, that Christians have more freedom of worship in Russia than they do here. This has been told, that even in public schools, the teachers are allowed to read the Bible if they choose in Russia. They're not allowed to here. I've heard that.
Well, it depends on how it's read. If it's read as a
Okay.
historical document, then you can, but if you're proselytizing, then you can't.
Believe me, if the right parent complains, you can't read it as
Oh,
anything.
I won't argue that.
You can't read it at all. Depends on who you get in your class, and because I knew of a teacher who actually had the students say grace before they went to lunch. Nobody complained, so he got away with it. He was an older man when I was young, but he got away with it. I was a little bit timid about doing it because I knew what the law said. Now, it is legal for an individual student to bow his head and say a prayer before he eats. That's legal. The Supreme Court has ruled so. But teachers cannot conduct it. And football teams will sometimes have a prayer, but the coaches are told they have to leave, and the team is allowed to pray.
No, it's the referees. Before the referees enter the field, you can pray.
What's that?
Before the refs get on the field, your team comes in
Okay,
and pray.
yeah. The team, but I understand the coaches are not allowed to conduct
Because of
it.
the ACLU.
But yeah, it depends, again, it depends on who complains and what the rulings are. And when a case like that goes to court, you don't know what's going to happen. Oh, now, something else I've not yet mentioned, very important. Islam has no priest. They say that every believer has, now, the word priest means someone who mediates between man and God. Islam says that every person has direct access to God, man or woman, without going through a priestly mediator. No priest. Now, among Christians, the Protestants have what they call priesthood of all believers. Catholics, both Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholic, have priests. Again, no priestly mediators because everyone has access to Allah. They have a lot of religious holidays, some of them being Ramadan. They have fast days. They believe that every Muslim, if possible, should go to Mecca at least once in his lifetime. Go to Mecca and pray in front of the Black Stone. And to actually go to the Kaaba. Now, I think they're keeping better order now, but there have been persons who have been trampled to death when the worshippers have stampeded during these times. But I think that the Arabs are finally keeping better order because I haven't heard of this happening in recent years. Now, Christians and Jews are looked on as what they call people of the book, and they have allowed within their territory Christian and Jewish communities to exist. They have been accused by outsiders of trying to spread the religion by fire and sword. And folks, I can't leave this part out. What I will state about this, and if any of you want to correct me on it, you will. There have been times when they have and times when they haven't. And I talked to a man from India afterward. He didn't talk during the class. He came up to me afterward. The class said, yes, they converted the people of Pakistan. But again, the plot depends on the generation, the time, and the location. Muhammad, all right. At the beginning of his rule, Muhammad definitely believed in converting by persuasion. But then after he and his own followers are persecuted in Mecca, he came back to Mecca and has said, the people who follow him defend him must say he had this, for his own defense, he had to convert by fire and sword because otherwise there had been a continuous fight. So they justify it by saying, well, he had to convert the Meccans by fire and sword owing to the fact that there was no other way to do it. But they deny that they used force to convert others. But a lot of people whom they've conquered will tell you that they do use force. Again, you can't make a blanket statement. It varies from time to time and place to place. Now, they do believe that women are to be completely subservient to men. And again, each of you can decide for yourself what it means. But they also believe that there's a chain of command that even involves the younger brother being subservient to the older brother. And you have to do what, right, all sons and daughters are subservient to their fathers. When a woman marries, she's subservient to her husband. This has created problems when they go into the modern world. For instance, a lot of Muslims are moving into Europe and a lot of Muslims moving to North America. And there have been difficulties in adjusting. For instance, some Muslim women would say, we have always worn a veil and we're going to wear a veil when we have a picture taken for a driver's license. But European courts have ruled that no, the women must remove their veil so their face is visible when they're taking a photo for the driver's license. Otherwise, they can't get a license. This is a controversial point, I know, but nevertheless, this is a problem. Also, now, I have heard that the Muslims are terrified of their women. For any religion, if they lose their women, the religion is lost. It's the women more than the men that pass the religion on to the next generation. It's the women who not only bring the children into the world, but who do a lot to teach the children, give the children religious instructions, much more so than the men. And when Muslim women move to a European or American country, a lot of times they find out that, hey, there's a different life that's out there than the life I'm used to. So they'll start adopting Western ways and dress like Western women. Then they'll get a job at a Western job. I mean, whether it be a job as a store clerk or a job at a factory, but they'll get a job and get their own money. They'll set up their own bank accounts and at times start spending their money independently of their husbands. And more than once, divorces occur among them. Now, Lockheed hired some Muslims, and the Muslim man they hired, they eventually made a supervisor. He was a son of a Pakistani nobleman, but he never got to be a nobleman himself because he was a second son, so his older brother got to be the nobleman. But anyway, this man came to the United States. His wife divorced him after a few years, so he went back to Pakistan, and his brother arranged another marriage for him, his brother who is now a nobleman. And he brought his new wife back, and as far as I know, they're still getting along great. But adopting Western ways among their women has been a real terror for the Muslims because they're afraid that if they take up these customs. Well, it's a problem in Arabia because until recently, Arab women were not allowed to drive. But now Arab women are allowed to drive. At one time, an Arab woman was not allowed to be anywhere without a man. Either the man had to be either her father, her brother, or her husband. But now they're allowing Arab women to go out alone. I mean, I've heard this from other sources. Okay, Moses, run shop. Okay,
I
yeah.
have a comment.
Go ahead.
So like you're saying like these places like that Islam is like where they like haven't met, and I'm just like when I grew up like in school they tell me Islam is like the third largest growing religion.
Right.
So like I'm just thinking it's like everywhere, just like Christianity, just like Judaism. So I'm just confused. Why are you saying it like in specific spots rather than like over globally in the whole world?
They're individual. I mean, there's the whole world, but there's individual places within the world. I think that's what I mean. And in some places they behave this way, and in some places they behave that way, and other places behave that way. And you can't make a blanket statement, even though you didn't try. But you can't, like.
Well, isn't there like many different like types of Islam, just like?
Believe me, there are. Yeah, there are many different. Yeah,
Christianity,
like Christianity. It became divided after a while, and this is true of every movement, whether it be Confucianism in China or Buddhism as it spread out from India, or Hinduism. Every religion, including Christianity, eventually fragments, and they start arguing what did our founder Buddhist In the case of Buddha, his writings were not written down for 200 years after he died. And a group up here said he said this, and a group of no, he said this, and a group, and they do a lot of arguing among themselves as to what Buddha said that nobody really knows. And there's no group. I mean, there's just no group that can say, oh, we're all cohesive, we're all united, we all think alike, we all act alike. We don't. We're human, and they're human too. Now, they believe in righteousness, and they believe at the end of life the wicked will be judged. Now, folk, what I'm about to say, every Muslim will disagree with, but I'm going to say it anyway because you all heard it. They believe if a person dies in a jihad or holy war, he will get 72 virgins in the afterlife. Again, you can decide for yourself what you believe, because Muslims themselves would deny that this is so.
Can I add something?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Ned. Go ahead. We want to hear from you.
I mean, it's true.
It's true.
Whatever, yeah, I have heard that before. But it also goes like, it's not like virgins, of course, but it's that if you go to heaven, you get your, like, let's say, I'm not sure if that's 72 or not, that number.
Yeah.
But if you go to heaven, you do get your girls. So if you're a girl and if you're a man, you do get a man. So basically, if you go to heaven, you can have whatever you want. And I mean, jihad, I know how it goes and stuff, whatever, like it's like Islamic way of fighting, I guess. But it's jihad basically, if I translate it, it basically means living the thing. Like, let's say I have to get up this morning to get to here. Getting up is like painful because I don't want to get up. That is jihad, you know. But the jihad that they meant is basically for Islamic reason, you know, to protect Islam. Yes, you do go to heaven, and even if you die for your country, you do go to heaven directly. So it's kind of like a lot of stuff.
Okay, yeah, I want to add something that, I'm glad for your input. Some years ago, a man came up to me and said, Mr. Cunningham, you have me down on eye-colleges that I made in 80s on the test, but here's my Scantron, I really only made in the 60s. I said, come with me in the hall. I said, because of your honesty, I'm going to let you keep the extra points. I mean, it's but just don't tell anyone about this. But you're honest. That man needed points anyway. But that's something else. But I let him keep the points that he didn't actually earn. But I gave them to him because it was honesty. This young man was Muslim. And I had a girl explain to me, a young woman, mother, that this was an example of jihad, whether he was willing to sacrifice a higher grade for a lower one. Yeah, okay, that's another example.
What is jihad then?
Well, to the outsider, it appears like jihad means fighting or striving away with the Lord. But for the Muslims, they explain it as where you sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, sacrifice yourself. Like this man who was willing to, because he was honest. Now, I want to say this. Some of the most honest people you'll ever meet are Muslim. Some of the most morally upright people you'll ever meet are Muslim. Very, very true. Very much so.
They'll tell you to your face they don't like you. You're like, that's what's up.
And I've had students tell me that they read about these terroristic acts and think every Muslim man I saw, by the way, this man I'm talking about, he was a fairly large man, but he looked like he couldn't even kill a fly. I mean, not that he was weak, he looked too gentle to even step on a bug, I mean, almost. But some of the Muslim men, and women too, are very, very upright. And I had another Muslim man who offered to come and mow my yard for me or whatever. Of course, I declined the offer, but I mean, I'm not supposed to pay or accept gifts. Now, there was another young Muslim woman who wanted to buy me a shirt. I had to decline it. I mean, she was asking my size, but I had to decline it. I'm not supposed to accept gifts. I had another man said, Mr. I'll pay your gas now if you'll come over here and give me the test on a certain date. I said, no, wait now. I might come over and give you the test on a certain date, but I'm not going to accept money from you. If I get caught doing that, my days here will be over. Anyway, yes.
According to the book, on page 189, it says, sometimes jihad is used in the sense of striving in the way of the Lord as a means of exhorting believers to struggle against the evil within themselves.
That's why that man was
daily-
practicing jihad when he told me that I had given him 20 points that he actually hadn't earned. He
So
was
basically,
practicing
it's a
jihad.
conscience?
It's a matter of, yeah, striving against the bad part of yourself,
Yeah.
which we all have. We all have evil within us, yes.
It's funny that you said like we can't accept gifts. Like when I was over in Iraq, that was like the first thing they keep briefing people on. It's like they're trying to give you gifts, but you can't accept them.
Yeah.
And I would tell my soldiers like, as long as you don't trade your weapon for a Ferrari, I'm cool with it. But if you got like a goat or something, don't bring it back on the 5 where we're living at.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you accept a dog?
It depends on how hot that Ferrari is, don't
Yeah,
No.
it would give you all types of stuff. The food was good,
I think you would much rather have a weapon sometimes.
you? I mean, that Ferrari fast, I'm driving.
Okay. They also